Hello folks, a rare double posting today because I want to let you know about some new resources I've created or am in the process of creating that you may be interested in. So for one, if you haven't seen it, my first free resource is the Emotional Anarchy: Surviving Self-Care in Capitalism's Clutches. That is also available as a video series. You can find it under my playlists, but now I have two more guides available for viewing and I'll link them in the description. The first one is called Fitness Tips from a Chronically Ill Bitch. This is a working title because I am terrible at titling things. This is a collection of fitness tips and a vague sort of recipe guide. The emphasis is on strength training and on how to build sustainable habits. The goal of this guide is to help you incorporate habits that support the longevity of the brain and body. The goal of this guide is not weight loss. Weight loss is rarely a healthy goal by itself. Becoming smaller is almost never a healthy fitness goal. Instead, I'm going to focus on becoming stronger, more flexible, and improving endurance. These measures will vary wildly depending on you, your goals, your limitations, and the tools at your disposal. I am not a physical trainer nor a nutritionist. This guide is not intended to treat, cure, diagnose, or prevent any illness, issue, or disorder. These are just some tips that worked for me that I've collected over many years of adjusting my habits to accommodate my body. This one is only 6 chapters right now. It will likely get longer later. I've taken a little bit of a break from this one to get some more resources started and available, but I think there's enough info here to still be useful as is. So far, we've got Chapter 1, BMI is Bullshit, where I kind of dig into everything that's wrong with using BMI as a metric of health or fitness, and what you should do instead. Chapter 2, Bodyweight Exercises, I go into some lesser-known bodyweight exercises. A lot of folks hear that term and immediately think of push-ups or pull-ups or squats or whatever, and those can be really difficult movements, and if you can't do those, it can feel like there's no starting place for you, but that's just not true. There's a ton of great bodyweight exercises, many that can be done while sitting, and all of them can be modified to suit varying ability levels. Chapter 3, Building New Habits. This is where I get into how to create sustainable new habits and where a lot of folks go wrong with this. Our society loves the all or nothing approach where you hurl yourself into some monumental new undertaking, and that's just nonsense. It doesn't work. It sets you up for failure. So I talk about how to unlearn some of that nonsense and approach new habits with a different mentality. Chapter 4, Sample Training Plan. This one, I just literally show you how I structure my own workouts and explain why I do it this way. Chapter 5, a note about gluten-free baking. I am unable to consume wheat products, and the vast majority of gluten-free products you can buy taste like fucking sadness and cardboard, and way too many gluten-free recipes are just really bad. I've had to eat this way for almost a decade, and I've figured out how to make actually tasty baked goods with gluten-free flours. If you have been blessed with the ability to consume wheat, you can skip this chapter, but if you're like me and you're tired of choosing between a treat that will taste good but make you horribly sick, or one that tastes like defeat, and you have some baseline comfort level baking, then you should take a look at my approach and see if it improves your experience. Chapter 6, Recipes. This is not a normal recipe guide. It's not set up like a meal plan, nor is it fixated with health foods. It's focused on using whole ingredients and taking as much effort out of cooking as possible, and that's it. You decide for yourself which foods you enjoy and thus which foods are healthiest for you. Everyone knows living off of fried foods and ice cream is probably not great for our health. You don't need a condescending lecture about food choices. The first half of this chapter is just my favorite methods for cooking a lot of meat with the least effort possible, and then a lot of one pot or low effort but flavorful recipes using leftovers. My approach to cooking is to spend a little effort making a lot of meat and vegetables not be raw, and then the next day I spend a little effort dressing them up into something fun that doesn't take forever to make because you're starting with mostly pre-cooked ingredients. The next guide is called Brainwaves, Neurotransmitters, and the Enteric Nervous System. Also a working title because I am just really incredibly bad at coming up with titles. I started writing the Emotional Anarchy guide like a month before I finally came up with a name for it, so presumably at some point a good name will come to me, but for now it's this clunky mess. This one is really just a miscellaneous hodgepodge of neuroscience facts. Between 6 years of assorted higher education and 7 years of working, I've had to cram a lot of information into my head, and I basically just wanted to aggregate some of that and pour it onto paper. Chapter 1, Neurophysiology Background Info, just a little review of some facts and concepts so the following chapter makes more sense. Chapter 2, Brain Waves, I go over electrical patterns in the brain from 1 Hz to 38 Hz. This isn't the full extent of brainwave activity, but it's the most basic starting points. I talk about 6 different brainwaves: delta, theta, alpha, mu, beta, and the sensory motor rhythm, and how these waves are correlated with behavior or dysfunction. Chapter 3, Ratios. I go into how the brainwaves affect each other and how certain ratios of certain frequencies across the brain are associated further with behavior or dysfunction. Chapter 4, Neurochemistry Background Info, another review of terms and concepts so the following chapter makes more sense. Chapter 5, Neurotransmitters. I go over 6 major neurotransmitters and how they affect behavior, as well as how having too low or too high concentrations of any given neurotransmitter are associated with dysfunction. Chapter 6, the gut-brain axis. In this one, I get into the enteric nervous system, also called the gut brain, give some background info about how it's set up, how it communicates with itself, and with the central nervous system. Chapter 7, the gut biome. Gut flora is complicated enough that I gave it its own chapter. I get into how the bacteria in the gut, not just the neurons in the gut, participate in the exchange between the ENS and the CNS. This one is also probably not done forever, but it is done for now. Later I may come back and add more information or go more in depth. These chapters are kind of like an overview right now, and I may come back and get a little deeper into the nitty-gritty details. But again, I think there's enough info now in there to be worth reading. There is one more guide that is not yet available for viewing, but will be soon. It's only 6 pages right now, and I want to get a little more on paper before I put it out there. But this one is on education reimagined for an anarchist utopia, or at least for my anarchist utopia. I go into the necessity of giving kids autonomy over their lives, including things like being able to choose their own clothes or take bathroom breaks on their own schedule. I talk about the grotesque issues with typical curriculums and what kind of changes we need to see in terms of topic and structure of teaching, as well as who is most suitable to really be writing various curriculums. I go into the problems with testing, both typical class tests and standardized testing. I talk about how essential movement is to the learning process, especially for young kids. As I said, this one isn't even done enough to be useful yet. I want to get a bit more written before I release this one, but it should be available soon. If you've read any of my guides and have questions or have topics you'd hoped would be covered in them but weren't, let me know. Leave me a comment here, message me on the Opulent Opinions Facebook page, or send me an email to opulentopinions@gmail.com. And if it's an answer I have or a topic I know anything about, I'd be happy to let you know and add it into the guide.